Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am excited to introduce you to my guest today, Suzanne Flax. Suzanne is a special education advocate and consultant here in the greater Boston area. Originally from Michigan, she has a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Michigan and went on to earn a master's degree in speech and language pathology at Columbia University. For over 30 years, Suzanne has dedicated her career as an advocate and consultant for students and families with diverse special education needs and is licensed and certified in several disciplines. She holds licenses in the states of Massachusetts and New York through the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And she is certified as an early intervention specialist through the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and has completed a certificate as a parent consultant through the Federation of Children with Special Needs. In 2017, Suzanne completed an extensive training program in Wrights, law, special education law, and advocacy. This training enabled her to fulfill a goal to transition her career from a full-time practice as a speech-language pathologist to opening her own business as a special education advocate. She consults with families, urban and suburban school systems, and private schools, offering her extensive knowledge in all disabilities, including communication disorders, autism spectrum disorders, developmental delays, and transition planning. She provides observations and evaluations of current and proposed individual education plans and 504 placements. She also attends team meetings, Bureau of Special Education Appeals, mediation, and due process hearings, as well as securing out-of-district placements. Please join me in welcoming Suzanne Flax. Welcome, Suzanne. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I know that you recently made some significant changes in your career path, and I'd love for our listeners to hear more about where you started and what led you to make the changes that you have.
Okay, let me start with my background. I am by training a speech and language pathologist and have done that for many, many years and worked in all sorts of different type of work environments. And around 2010, I had been a speech therapist for 25 years, and I was working in my own private practice. And I was beginning to get bored, which I think what for me was a sign that it was time to move on, that I had done just about everything I wanted to do as a speech therapist.
So so that was about 8 years ago,
Yep.
Right? You got bored. So how did you know, what were the signs that you were ready to make a change or a shift? You said you were bored. What did that look like for you?
Well, as a speech therapist in private practice, I was seeing patients back to back. So I was working 4 days a week, and I had between 20 to 25 clients.
Every week?
Every week. And I could see 5 to 6 clients back to back.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was finding was I didn't have the enthusiasm that I had as a younger, less seasoned therapist, that, is becoming very rote. I could easily identify what the issues were and come up with a treatment plan. So it had lost that novelty and excitement.
So it sounds like some of the excitement would have been in the range of, maybe having some new opportunities to unlock a puzzle or solve certain problems. So that was in 2010. So what did you do from that point once you acknowledged, that you were things were getting stale?
Well, I started doing some volunteer work. related to my profession, but not exactly my profession. So I gave in-service at the Asperger's Association on stuttering in Asperger's, why it was different than just typical stuttering.
Oh, wow.
That it was part of the Asperger's. And a friend of mine who's also a speech therapist, we did it together, and she knew much more about putting together a PowerPoint and, giving talks in front of an audience.
So your way of kind of adding a little spice, let's say, to your professional life was to, in addition to your private practice,
Yep.
was to incorporate providing these in-service programs, training workshops.
Yep.
To the Asperger's Association, and you had to build up some new skill sets in order to be able to make those presentations.
Which is what made it exciting. It was novel. And I had to really learn new skills. The other thing I started doing was trying to find ways to incorporate different things into my private practice. So I started doing some educational advocacy as a speech therapist. So I would go into team meetings as one of their expert specialists.
So this was in a school setting. You would be advocating for one of your clients.
Yes.
In the context of a team meeting in their school, and be able to speak about your work with that student and what their strengths were, what their weaknesses were. So how did you, so you stayed with the private practice,
yep.
right? And then you added other elements to keep things more interesting. So that was sort of your strategy at that point in time.
Yes.
Right? And then what happened?
Well, one of my advocacy cases went to hearing. And what made that kind of a aha moment was I was doing less speech therapy and more advocacy and giving a big chunk of the money to my employer.
So you weren't having when you say private practice, you were working, you were not completely self-employed at that point?
No, I was an employee of I was the speech department within a private practice.
Ah, okay.
But I had the flexibility to do whatever I wanted, but I was giving what I brought in to the owner of the private practice a percentage of what I was making.
I see. Okay. So you had a case where it went to hearing, and that sounds like that's a much bigger step than maybe many of the other cases you were working with.
Yes, and it was intense. It was scary. The parent whose child wasn't getting the services she needed had elicited the help of a lot of independent evaluators. So he created his own team.
Okay, and you were a member of that team.
I was, but these other people, there was an attorney and a clinical psychologist, served as good role models for me.
How so?
Well, they were doing this work independently.
You mean taking on cases and appearing at hearings and advising families on whatever their expertise was in terms of trying to get their child's needs met?
Yes, and they were all self-employed.
Okay.
So, I and very independent and doing very creative. We did a lot of out-of-the-box thinking.
As a team.
Because we were up against a traditional school system that had a lot of money. Whereas this father he was on a lower budget. So, the creativity came in to how to approach different issues or questions that the attorney on the other side was bringing up. And more of my time was spent working with these advocacy cases because I had two other cases that weren't at hearing, but the parents were also needing an advocate to work with them to get the services their child needed.
Mm-hmm. So you really moved. It's still working under the same private practice, but you really moved from providing, somewhat repetitive individual services to taking that expertise to another audience in some ways, right?
Yes, and also I incorporate the expertise I have as a speech therapist as an advocate. It's my personal philosophy that everything we do builds onto the next thing we do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, so, if language is an issue, it makes me a powerful advocate because I can use the language of a speech therapist as an advocate.
Mm-hmm. So, and you said, your personal philosophy. I want to just for our listeners shine a little bit of a light on the fact that you've been a working parent.
Yep.
You have 2 children, both of whom have had special needs. So this isn't just a professional pursuit for you. There is a personal element of this for you. And yet I see very clearly in my experience with you that you're able to, balance between what's personal and professional. But yet having that knowledge has helped you to help your own children as well.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if your own personal situation is part of the passion that you've developed for advocacy, and for really trying to make sure that kids who have needs, let's say, that go beyond the realm of their school system, or even have needs that can be met within the school system, but the fact is that they have needs that really need to be addressed. And so this is a very long question.
It's okay.
But I wanted to bring that into the conversation here because you bring a depth of understanding, not just based on your own clinical and expertise around speech, but also you are a parent of special needs children.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have an understanding and empathy for what parents are going through with all this, and many of them without the benefit of your own knowledge of a variety of areas of needs that certain kids have. So I think that's an important aspect to what you bring to this. And yet what I admire also is that you bring it, but you bring it with both a sense of professionalism and really sort of keep the parts separate that need to be separate from what's personal for you and how to help someone else. So I know that, 2010, you started to make some changes. What has happened since then? Because you've really taken things on even bigger than simply adding a few elements into your private practice. You've actually made a significant change at this point. And I'm curious to hear more about that. How did that come about?
Well, as I say, I continued working as an advocate within the private practice. And also, my children got older and their needs began to be addressed in a way that I was spending less time meeting their needs, going to doctor's appointments and school meetings to help them in what they needed in their lives. And that opened the door. Mm. I felt like, my daughter is going to college in 5 or 6 years. I have this window of opportunity where both my kids are settled, but that's going to change soon. Mm-hmm. So I continued at my job. I needed the paycheck.
Yes.
And also the stability of having working hours. Mm-hmm. And I took a course through the Federation for Children with Special Needs. And it was training to become an advocate. And this is a really special class because most of the people who take it are parents of kids with special needs.
Oh.
And, it was an opportunity to, meet parents who were living my life, B, to learn about different school systems and how they handle different types of disabilities. And there was really a small portion of us who were going to do this professionally. And so we had those of us who were going to go on and become advocates decided to do the internship part of the course, which was 25 hours of working in their call center at the Federation and 25 hours as working as a pro bono advocate where the Federation provided support.
So over what period of time did you take the course and do the internship? I think some of our listeners might be very curious to hear about other things you considered before taking the course. So, for example, practical things like some people say, oh, I can't afford to go back to school, or, I don't have the time. And it sounded like, as you said, some of your time was opening up as your kids got older. And you had the interest and the desire in terms of, and you don't need to tell us how much it costs, but how did you plan for the cost and plan for the time that this was going to require? And over what period of time did you take the class and do the internship?
Well, I did plan for the cost, which was not exorbitant, but, we put away a certain percentage of money on a monthly basis because I had decided 6 months before I took the course that I wanted to do both the course and the internship. So if you do the internship, it was much more expensive.
Oh, so you paid for that part of the experience as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is, even though it wasn't graduate school, the model was similar to graduate school. So I was getting accredited by doing the internship. In terms of the time, I have had the flexibility to do whatever I wanted in terms of how I scheduled my clients. So the course started in October. And over the summer, people's schedules change and my business as a speech therapist just slows down. So every fall, I have the opportunity to develop a new type of schedule, knowing that it's going to be the same schedule for the entire calendar year. School year. So the course was all day on Tuesdays.
Oh.
And what I did was I do work at night. So I would go into the Federation on Tuesday mornings, and the course was 9 to 3 in Boston, and my private practice is in Wellesley. I would plan to start my day at 5:30.
Ah, okay.
So I would still see 2 or 3 clients on Tuesdays.
On top of going to class all day.
Yeah.
So you did some financial planning in terms of putting money aside for this to make it happen. You had a very clear intention. And then you also had the opportunity to craft a schedule that was going to work well for you, your work, and your family to make this all happen. But it definitely took some planning ahead of time. And of course, the desire was there.
The motivation was definitely there. This was what I could see myself doing with my life, that this was how I had envisioned the direction my career was going to go. I just didn't know it till I had, worked as a speech therapist for so many years and then started experimenting with different avenues.
So that brings me to another question, actually. When you think about how many people out there might be in a career that's starting to feel stale, or they feel like they're stagnating, or they're just not as excited or interested anymore in what they're doing. It sounds like they could take a few pages out of your book and take some of the steps, not exactly the same ones you did, but the idea of, taking some variations on the theme, not completely throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
And, adding a few things, maybe doing some volunteer work, fitting it in, of course, with what's best for your family and the rest of your life too. And then making a plan for some more substantial change.
Yeah, I think the steps towards the bigger picture is key. Once I had decided what my direction would be, then I was able to figure out what steps I needed to take to move in that direction.
It reminds me of something that Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I think you're one of them. And that is
Tammy.
to start with the end in mind. So you had a very clear idea of what the end was, and then you backed into it with all the different steps you needed to put in place. What other advice to people who are trying to make a change in their professional life? What kinds of advice might you give them based on your own experience?
Well, I think it's very scary to embrace a change. It's not that we're defined by our work, but our work and career are a big part of our life.
Absolutely.
And to embrace that, this is very frightening, but I really want to do something else. This is growing old, and I'm not feeling good about it. And to allow yourself, open yourself up to different experiences. Trying on different hats. If you're a salesperson, what can I do with these skills? Let's say you're a salesperson in a department store, but you're also a jeweler. So at home, you make jewelry. Exhibit your own work. Go to an art walk or fair and, get a sense of, is this people I would want to work with? Because it's also how you spend your day. Are my coworkers giving me the support I need? Or is there a different type of coworker I need at this point?
I think that's an excellent point. A lot of people that I talk to in my coaching practice will tell me that, I like what I've been doing, but I no longer like the environment I'm in at work or the culture of the organization. And that's the kind of thing that seems to really bring people down. It's not necessarily the work itself, but it could be the people, the changes in leadership, all kinds of things that happen within organizations. And I also want to make sure that our listeners know where you are here and now today. You've given us some great advice, but I think you've made another significant shift from that private practice in Wellesley to what you're doing right now. So give us the cherry on the sundae here.
Okay. Well, I am an educational advocate.
Full-time.
Pretty much full-time. I couldn't quite give up my speech part of me. So I do see 7 clients privately, but not where I used to work. I work in a suite with psychologists.
But you're completely self-employed
I'm
now.
completely self-employed, which for me is very, very important. And those were issues with my old job was, I had a boss that was beginning to feel oppressive. But what's nice about the advocacy is the relationship I have is with the parents versus with the children I'm working with. I mean, the child is really important to the whole picture. But the day-to-day conversations are with adults, school personnel, parents, independent evaluators. And I find that very stimulating. And, I'm going to school meetings. I have a few cases that are going to go to hearing. So it's preparing for hearing. And it's very dynamic in a way that being a speech therapist full-time wasn't. I just want to add one more piece is I find that the culture of advocacy is different than the culture of being a speech therapist. Speech therapists, the field is primarily women. And I still feel like women undercut themselves, especially women in the helping professions.
Say more about that.
Well, I think our pay is lower and we feel okay with that.
Mhm.
It's like, this is what I do. And income is mandated by health insurance.
Right, right, right.
So what happens is you end up doing a lot more work than therapy, therapy prep, talking to outside professionals, and you can't bill for that time.
Ah, right, right, right.
You can only bill for the time you're doing therapy. And as an advocate, I can bill for all my time.
Right. And you're bringing your expertise to all of that time.
Yes.
Right, right.
Just
Okay.
as I was as a speech therapist. So it's the billing and the skill set is more like an attorney.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I go into a team meeting and parents say they're going to bring their advocate, that there's a degree of respect that I wasn't getting as a speech therapist.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of factors here that have really contributed to both the decision to make some changes in your career, but then even as you stepped into those changes, which you did in a very thoughtful and gradual way, because here we are at 2018. So
Yeah.
this process has taken some time. You have other factors in your life that you also were attending to during this time, and
Yeah.
you were able to have it all, but you had to have it all over a period of time.
Exactly. And I just want to share with your listeners the most stressful but exciting time was transitioning out of my job.
Yeah.
Because what happened was the case I was doing pro bono for the Federation, I had finished up my 25 hours and I stayed on for 5 more hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the case still wasn't done. And I was beginning to pick up advocacy cases through these different listservs and other people who knew me. And I told my supervisor at the Federation, I said, I'm sorry, I can't work for pro bono right now. I have a full-time job as a speech therapist. I'm taking on, advocacy clients. So they found the money.
Wow. So you advocated for yourself.
I did.
And there's one more thing I want to point out here that I think is probably also key for a lot of people who are making a big change. And the big change you made, it may not sound like it's that big to some people, from, being a speech therapist and working with, children with a variety of special needs and then becoming an advocate. It seems like a natural evolution. But moving from being an employee or contractor to being fully self-employed is also a big leap. And I've talked to a number of people who've made some of these changes, and I think the other piece that really was key was just the level of support that you need to feel and have in order to make these decisions and make these changes. And I would imagine that your husband played a key role in supporting you in making these changes.
He was incredibly supportive. We laugh about it now, but at one point I had keys to 3 different offices. So I was still doing my speech practice. I had the keys to that office. I was starting this speech private practice in Newton Center. So I had keys to that office. And a friend of mine was lending me her office to see advocacy clients. And at one point, Marty said to me, "This is so cool. You have 3 sets of keys." And it sounds like a little thing, but it was huge that he said that.
Yeah.
I was very stressed out. I was pulled in 3, 4, or 5 different directions.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged that there was something, to use Marty's terminology, cool about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that without his support, this would have been a much harder road for you. That the people I know who've been able to make changes, not that everyone has a spouse or a partner, but to feel that there are people in your corner who are cheering you on and are supportive and are appreciating the moves that you're making. I think that's a key element. I would say to most people, regardless of what your personal situation is, make sure you have a team, a team of cheerleaders or people who are in a substantial way, really encouraging you to take these steps.
And, as a family, we had a lot to lose.
Mm-hmm.
I carried the benefits. We relied on my paycheck. I didn't know after I left my job as a speech therapist whether or not I would continue to make an income.
Mm-hmm.
And he really supported that. He embraced my fear. He embraced the change. He said, I believe in you. You're going to double your income. We can buy some of the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are not tax deductible now will become so.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, certain things will cost you more money, in the bigger picture, you will be making more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think...
And you'll be happier.
Right. And I think the fact that he was willing to allow me to take those risks was the support that I needed.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Suzanne, this has been really helpful, really enlightening. To those of you out there who are thinking about making a change, I highly recommend that you take a couple of pages out of Suzanne Flax's book on the different steps that you might take for finding yourself in a happier, more meaningful and fulfilling career. So thank you again, Suzanne, for joining me today. And we will look forward to seeing where things go.
Thank you, Tammy. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Suzanne Flax. It was such a pleasure to speak with her and learn about her professional journey and the difference she has been making for special needs individuals and their families. What is your key takeaway from this interview? Is there something you'll put into action this week that you can benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 002. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Suzanne, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? That's great. I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows? Maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.